What if you were given a compass that didn't point north but instead led you to the greatest treasure of all? A treasure hidden not in gold or jewels, but in the hearts you touch and the lives you change. Follow the journey of Eli, a young traveler who discovers that true riches lie in the direction of love, as he navigates challenges, encounters the broken, and finds himself transformed by the very path he walks. Eli stood on the edge of the cliff, staring at the horizon where the first light of dawn painted the hills with hues of gold and lavender. His heart pounded, both from the excitement of the unknown and the ache of leaving everything familiar behind. In his hand, the compass rested heavily, its bronze casing cool despite the warm morning air. The needle inside spun wildly, almost as if alive, before settling on a direction, east. Eli tightened the strap of his satchel, feeling the weight of his provisions and the dreams he carried. Behind him, the village lay quiet in the early light. Smoke curled lazily from chimneys, the distant bleat of sheep the only sound breaking the stillness. He had grown up among those stone cottages, tending fields with his father and later, after his father's passing, with his sister Hannah. She had been furious when he first told her of his plans. A compass that doesn't even point north? She had snapped the night before as they sat by the fire. And you're just going to follow it? That merchant was probably a fraud. Eli had stared at the strange object, its surface worn and scratched, but its pull undeniable. He said it doesn't guide you to places but to what you truly need, he said quietly. I have to find out what that means. Hannah's eyes softened, but her lips tightened as she handed him a bundle of bread. I think you're chasing a dream, Eli, she murmured. But if you're going, promise me you'll come back. Now, standing on the threshold of his journey, Eli whispered to himself, Show me the way. The compass needle quivered, then pointed firmly east. With one last glance at the life he was leaving behind, Eli took his first step into the unknown. The first few days of Eli's journey were exhilarating. The dirt roads wound through golden fields, the sun warm on his back. He passed through small villages where merchants sold their wares and children played in the streets. He found comfort in the rhythm of walking, the steady pull of the compass guiding him. But the excitement began to wane as the days stretched into nights, and the terrain grew harsher. The bread Hannah had packed grew stale, and water was harder to come by. On the third evening, as the sun dipped below the horizon, the compass needle began to spin wildly. Eli frowned, watching as it suddenly pointed sharply to the left, away from the road and into a barren plain. The land stretched flat and desolate, with no sign of life. Doubt gnawed at him, but the pull of the compass was insistent. As he ventured into the plain, he spotted a thin column of smoke rising in the distance. His pace quickened, curiosity tinged with caution. He came upon a small family huddled around a dying fire. The father, a wiry man with sunken cheeks, stood protectively in front of the others. The mother cradled a crying child, her face etched with exhaustion. "Who are you?" the father demanded, his voice hoarse but wary. "A traveler," Eli replied, raising his hands. "I saw your fire. Do you need help?" The man's eyes narrowed, but he didn't move. Behind him, the mother tore a small piece of bread and offered it to the boy, who clung to her with desperate hands. Eli's heart ached. Without a second thought, he reached into his satchel and pulled out the remaining bread Hannah had packed. "Here," he said, holding it out to the woman. Her eyes widened. "We can't take your food," she whispered, tears brimming. "You can," Eli said firmly. "And you should." That night, Eli lay on the hard ground, his stomach empty but his heart strangely full. When he glanced at the compass, its needle glowed faintly in the moonlight, as if approving his choice. The plains gave way to rolling hills, and soon Eli found himself on narrow mountain paths where the air grew thinner and colder. The beauty of the landscape, jagged peaks against a cobalt sky, rivers cutting through deep valleys, did little to ease the loneliness pressing against him. Days passed without encountering another soul, and the silence became a weight he carried alongside his satchel. It was on the third day in the mountains that he spotted her. A woman sat on a boulder by the side of the trail, her head buried in her hands. Her dark hair fell in tangled waves, obscuring her face. As Eli approached, he noticed her shoulders shaking with silent sobs. "Are you all right?" he asked gently, stopping a few paces away. She startled, looking up with red-rimmed eyes. Her face was pale, and for a moment she seemed unsure whether to speak or flee. "I've lost my way," she said finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "Where are you trying to go?" Eli pressed, crouching to meet her gaze. She shook her head. "I don't know anymore. I thought I knew, but now I'm just wandering." Eli hesitated, then sat beside her, careful to leave some space. "Sometimes being lost is part of the journey," he said. "It doesn't mean you're on the wrong path. It just means you're figuring out where you're meant to go." Her lips trembled as she looked at him. "You think so?" "I do," Eli said. "Maybe we're both in between. Let me walk with you for a while. We can figure it out together." They traveled side by side for the next few days. Her name was Mira, and her story unraveled slowly. She had left her home after a betrayal that had shattered her trust. Though the road was hard, their companionship brought them both comfort. Eli found solace in her laughter, and Mira seemed to regain her strength with each step. When their paths finally diverged, Mira clasped his hands tightly. "Thank you," she said, her voice thick with emotion. "I think I've found my way again." Eli watched her disappear down the trail, the compass warm in his palm. It wasn't just guiding him, he realized, it was changing him. The road Eli traveled became more desolate as he descended from the mountains into a valley blanketed with fog. The compass needle pointed steadily forward, unshaken by the ominous stillness of the surrounding landscape. As he approached a village nestled at the base of the valley, he noticed something unsettling: the silence. No children playing, no merchants shouting their wares. The houses, though standing, looked abandoned, their windows dark and their doors closed. He finally encountered a man sitting on the edge of a crumbling well, his clothes tattered and his expression hollow. "What happened here?" Eli asked cautiously. The man looked up, startled, then sighed. "Plague," he muttered. "It swept through the village, leaving few alive. Those who remain are too afraid to do anything but wait, for death or for salvation." Eli felt the pull of the compass urging him forward. He followed it to the smallest house at the end of the street. Inside, he found a woman bent over a child lying still on a straw mattress. The boy's face was pale, his breath shallow. "He's all I have left," the woman whispered without looking up. "Please don't hurt us." "I'm here to help," Eli said softly, stepping closer. The next days were grueling. Eli drew water from the well, cleaned the boy's fevered body, and scavenged for herbs in the nearby forest. Though he lacked medical knowledge, his care seemed to bring a spark of life back to the boy. Slowly, the villagers began to emerge from their homes, curious and inspired by Eli's persistence. He showed them how to tend to one another and rebuild their sense of community. When Eli left the village, the woman hugged him tightly, tears streaming down her face. "You brought us hope," she said. The compass glowed faintly in his hand as he continued on his way. Eli entered a dense forest, its canopy so thick that only slivers of sunlight reached the ground. The air was heavy with the scent of damp earth and moss, and every crackling twig made him uneasy. As he followed the compass, he suddenly heard rustling around him. Before he could react, 3 men emerged from the shadows, their faces obscured by scarves. "Hand over everything you've got," one of them growled, brandishing a rusty knife. Eli's heart pounded as he raised his hands. "I don't have much," he said, setting his satchel on the ground. "Just some water and this." He held up the compass. The leader snatched it from his hand, examining it with disdain. "What's this? A broken trinket?" "It's not broken," Eli said, his voice steady despite his fear. "It's guiding me on a journey." The youngest of the bandits stepped closer, his curiosity piqued. "A journey to what?" "To help people," Eli said simply. To find something greater than gold? The leader laughed mockingly, but the younger man hesitated, his gaze lingering on Eli. Why would anyone follow something like this? He asked. Because it shows me where I'm needed, Eli replied. Maybe it's showing you something too? For a moment, silence hung in the air. Then the leader tossed the compass back to Eli. You're a fool, he spat. But you're not worth the trouble. Get out of here. As Eli walked away, he glanced back to see the youngest bandit staring after him, a look of contemplation on his face. Eli's journey brought him to a secluded valley surrounded by towering cliffs. The compass guided him through a narrow passageway that opened into a breathtaking garden. Vibrant flowers of every color carpeted the ground, and a crystal-clear stream wound its way through the center. But what struck Eli most was the group of travelers gathered there, their faces serene and their laughter echoing in the air. Welcome, said an older man with a gentle smile. You found the Garden of Reflection. Eli learned that the garden was a haven for those on journeys of their own. Each traveler shared stories of the paths they had walked, the hardships they had faced, and the lessons they had learned. Eli was struck by how similar their experiences were to his own, guided not by compasses but by the pull of their hearts. As he rested in the garden, he realized that his journey wasn't about reaching a destination but about becoming the kind of person who could bring light to others. When it was time to leave, the travelers sent him off with blessings, their voices filled with hope. The compass felt warm in his pocket as though it, too, was preparing him for what lay ahead. The next stage of Eli's journey took him to the highest peaks he had ever encountered. The air was thin, and each step was a battle against exhaustion. One day as he crossed a narrow ledge, he heard a faint cry for help. Looking down, he saw a man clinging to a rocky outcrop, his face pale with fear. Hold on, Eli called, his heart racing. He carefully climbed down to the man, his fingers scraping against the jagged rock. It was a harrowing effort, but Eli managed to pull the man to safety. The man, trembling with relief, looked at Eli with awe. Why would you risk your life for me? He asked. Because someone once did the same for me, Eli replied, thinking of the moments when others had shown him kindness on his journey. As they rested together, Eli realized that the compass wasn't just guiding him to help others. It was teaching him that true strength lay in selflessness. Years had passed since Eli had left his village, and the man who returned was not the same as the boy who had departed. His hair was longer, his face weathered, but his eyes held a light that hadn't been there before. The villagers greeted him with curiosity and joy, eager to hear the stories of his travels. Eli shared tales of the people he had met and the lessons he had learned. He spoke of the family in the barren plain, the lonely traveler in the mountains, and the village of shadows. His words ignited a spark in the villagers, inspiring them to see their own lives as opportunities to give and grow. Eli returned to the merchant who had given him the compass. She was older now, her hair streaked with silver, but her eyes were as sharp as ever. You've come far, she said, her voice warm. Eli nodded. The compass led me to places I never imagined. But now I wonder, why did you give it to me? The woman smiled knowingly. The compass doesn't guide you to treasure, it reveals the treasure within you. You've discovered love, courage, and purpose. That was its true gift. Eli felt tears well in his eyes as the weight of her words sank in. The compass had been a tool, but the real journey had been within him all along. Eli spent the rest of his days in his village, sharing the wisdom he had gained. He became a teacher, a guide, and a source of hope for those around him. Travelers came from far and wide to hear his story, drawn by the legend of the compass that pointed to love. One day, as Eli sat by the fire surrounded by eager listeners, he held the compass up for all to see. This is not just a tool, he said. It's a reminder. Love is the true north. It's the direction that leads us to each other, to acts of kindness, and to the greatest treasure of all. And so, Eli's story became a legacy, passed down through generations as a testament to the power of love, courage, and selflessness, the compass that guides us all. This is end of the story. Comment amen if you believe in Jesus' blessings. Please like this video and subscribe this channel for more Jesus story like this. May the God watch over you.